The winter garden at Ashford House glowed like a captured constellation, its glass walls shimmering with reflections of lamplight as evening settled over London. Eleanor stepped inside with a hesitant breath, unsure whether she had trespassed upon a sanctuary or been silently invited into it. The Duke had sent a brief note requesting a meeting, formal yet touched with something unspoken, and the moment she crossed the threshold, she understood why he had chosen this place. Warm air, scented faintly with jasmine and damp soil, wrapped around her like a gentle embrace, and the soft hush of unseen leaves filled the silence that stretched between her expectations and her fears. Nathaniel stood near a cluster of winter roses, his posture composed but betraying a rare restlessness in the way he shifted his weight. The lamplight brushed the edges of his profile, highlighting the thoughtful severity that had long served as his armor. When Eleanor approached, he turned with a quiet tension, as though uncertain whether to welcome her as a guest or brace himself for rejection. "My lord," she said, folding her hands before her to steady herself, "I received your message. You wished to speak privately." "Yes." His voice carried a depth that made her heart tighten. "There are matters I can no longer dismiss with courtesy alone." She nodded, though her pulse quickened. "I have questions as well." "Then you shall have answers," he replied. "At least the ones I have long denied you." A faint tremor touched her breath. "Why have you involved yourself so deeply in my affairs? Why defend me? Why allow society to believe you harbor intentions toward me when you have avoided such attachments for years?" A shadow flickered in his gaze, one of memory, grief, and something softer that seemed to tremble beneath restraint. He drew nearer, not enough to startle her, but enough for her to feel the quiet pull that had tangled their lives since the night of the ball. "I admired you long before the scandal," he said, each word measured, as though confessing a truth he had carried too long. "I admired your composure in rooms filled with vanity, your kindness where others feigned it, your sincerity in a world that rewards artifice. I admired you, and yet I stayed silent, for I feared my admiration would be misconstrued as an attempt to replace what I lost." Eleanor's breath caught. She had known he mourned his late wife, but she had never imagined her presence stirred shadows of that old sorrow. "You owe me no comparison," she whispered. "I would never presume." "You presume nothing," he interrupted softly. "It is I who presumed that solitude was the only honorable choice. I believed my heart incapable of seeking affection again. But when I saw your dignity torn apart before those who delighted in it, I could not remain still. Something within me refused it." She pressed a hand lightly to her collar, the place where the silver locket rested, a token she had not dared ask about. "Then the gift was yours?" The Duke exhaled slowly, almost with reluctance. "Yes. It belonged to my mother. It was given to me in her last days as a reminder to guard what is precious. He paused, his voice tightening. "I wished you to know someone still saw your worth, even as society sought to diminish it." Eleanor felt emotion swell in her chest, too immense to hide behind propriety. "You have offered me more than protection," she said quietly. "You have offered me steadiness, a kind I did not know I needed." He stepped closer, the distance shrinking to a breath. "Then tell me truthfully, have I trespassed upon your peace? Have my actions caused you discomfort you dared not speak?" She dared to meet his gaze fully, allowing him to see the tremor of uncertainty and the warmth blooming beneath it. "No," she said. "Your presence has unsettled me, but not from discomfort. From something else. Something I fear to name too soon." A flicker of hope lit his eyes, subtle but unmistakable. "And yet," he said lowly, "there remains the question of whether you wish me to continue standing at your side." Before she could answer, the door of the winter garden opened, and Lord Harcourt stepped inside, his expression drawn with conflicted dignity. He hesitated upon seeing them, but the Duke turned toward him with composed respect. "My lord," Nathaniel said, "I must speak with you." There was no uncertainty in his tone now, the moment demanded clarity. "I wish to request your permission to court your daughter openly." Eleanor inhaled sharply, her father's eyes flicking between them with a mixture of protective caution and profound surprise. "Your Grace," he began slowly, "Eleanor's reputation may never fully recover from recent events. The Tun will question your motives. They may accuse you of acting out of pity. If they do," the Duke replied, "then I shall correct them. Firmly. My intentions are neither impulsive nor charitable. They are sincere." Eleanor felt warmth rise within her, a quiet, astonished relief. Her father studied the Duke for a long-waited moment, then sighed, the tension in his shoulders easing. "You are a man of gravity, Your Grace. If you say your intentions are sincere, I will not oppose them." Nathaniel bowed his head respectfully. Eleanor's heart fluttered, yet beneath her joy lay a lingering thread of apprehension, for she knew society rarely accepted such unions without challenge. Her fears proved justified the following evening at Almack's, where the Duke's declaration became the talk of every table. Some murmured approval, but many whispered suspicion, calling the match ill-suited or undeserved. Eleanor felt the pressure of countless gazes as she entered the hall, but before uncertainty could take root, Nathaniel approached with unshakable calm. He extended his hand to her in full view of the assembled elite. "Will you take the floor with me, Lady Eleanor?" She hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. Gasps fluttered through the room. The dance began, and though her steps trembled at first, his steadiness guided her, anchoring her as though the world's noise could not penetrate the quiet space they created together. When the final notes faded, he leaned close enough that only she could hear. "If love is a scandal," he murmured, "then let us face it side by side." The words settled into her heart like a vow. And though whispers continued to swirl, though challenges undoubtedly awaited them beyond the gilded doors, Eleanor felt a new certainty blossom within her, a certainty that whatever storms lay ahead, she would not face them alone. For the first time since her humiliation, she felt not rescued but chosen. And as the Duke's hand remained steady in hers, she understood that their story, born from calamity yet shaped by courage, was only beginning. In the days following the Duchess's ball, London society devoured the scandal with unrestrained appetite. Lady Eleanor Harcourt's disgrace became the latest diversion for drawing-rooms and breakfast tables, her name carried from one polished salon to another with a blend of pity and cruel delight. Yet, at the center of the commotion, Eleanor herself remained curiously still. She stayed mostly indoors, venturing only for necessary visits, aware that every carriage rolling past her window might contain faces eager to glimpse the fallen young woman who had attracted the cold Duke of Ashford's intervention. And though she tried to tell herself that the Duke's gesture was merely an act of chivalry, she could not forget the steadiness of his voice or the fierce quiet that had emanated from him as he escorted her away from humiliation. The first unexpected ripple came 3 mornings after the ball. A small parcel arrived, wrapped in ivory paper and sealed with wax bearing no insignia. Eleanor opened it upon her writing desk with cautious curiosity. Inside lay a delicate silver locket, its surface engraved with the letters E.H. in elegant script, as though crafted specifically for her. She turned it over in her palm, feeling its gentle warmth from the morning sun. No note accompanied it, no indication of the giver, yet the gift's refinement suggested someone of considerable taste and means. Her mother speculated that it might be a well-meaning friend attempting to mend her spirits, but Eleanor suspected otherwise. The craftsmanship was too old, too personal, too thoughtfully chosen. A whisper of possibility brushed her thoughts, dangerously, irresistibly pointing toward the Duke. She kept the locket hidden beneath the collar of her gown that afternoon when she stepped into the Duke of Ashford's carriage at his unexpected yet impeccably proper invitation. He had sent a brief message requesting the honor of escorting her to a private supper hosted by the Prince Regent, who apparently wished to meet the young woman who had captured the Tun's attention. Eleanor's pulse quickened as the carriage door closed and the soft sway of motion began. The Duke sat opposite her, his posture straight, his expression composed, his gaze shadowed by something she could not name. For a long moment, neither spoke, the silence settling around them like a fragile treaty. At last she broke it. "Your Grace, I fear society has exaggerated your involvement in my affairs." "Society exaggerates everything," he replied, his tone carrying a faint dryness that almost resembled amusement. "It assigns significance where none exists and ignores worth where it is abundant." Eleanor studied him with cautious curiosity. "Then you do not regret offering your arm that night?" "I do not perform actions I regret," he said simply. Then, after a pause, more quietly, "I intervened because cruelty should never go unchallenged. I have witnessed too much of it to remain indifferent." There was something in his voice, an echo of old wounds, that unsettled her. She wished to ask more, but etiquette held her back. The carriage windows reflected the soft glow of lamps as they approached Carlton House, where the regent's supper glittered beneath a canopy of extravagance. Inside, noblemen and ladies greeted them with varying degrees of politeness, curiosity, and thinly concealed suspicion. Yet the Duke walked beside Eleanor with deliberate assurance, guiding her through the corridors as though shielding her from the invisible arrows of gossip. During the supper, he remained close, answering questions directed at her when the inquiries bordered on invasive. She found herself studying the angles of his profile, the thoughtful stillness of his hands, the quiet authority that seemed woven into his very manner. She realized he was not cold, as society claimed, but deeply guarded. His reserve was not born of arrogance but of loss. Later, when the evening's polite conversations gave way to softer music and smaller gatherings, Captain Harrington intercepted Eleanor as she stepped briefly away from the Duke's side. His expression carried strained contrition. "Lady Eleanor, I beg a moment." She froze, but before she could refuse, he spoke quickly. "I never intended to harm you. Circumstances, financial expectations, compelled my decision. You owe me no explanation," Eleanor interrupted, her voice calm despite the tremor beneath it. "We were never formally attached. I wish you happiness." The words cost her more than she wished to admit, but she spoke them with quiet dignity. Harrington reached toward her as though hoping to reclaim some remnant of her regard, but before his fingers could brush her sleeve, the Duke appeared beside her. His expression was unaltered, but his voice carried an unmistakable edge. "Captain Harrington, Lady Eleanor is engaged in conversation with me. If you wish to offer apologies, you may send them in writing." Harrington stiffened, muttered a curt bow, and withdrew. Eleanor's breath caught at the Duke's protectiveness, but he only offered his arm again, his manner unreadable. She took it, though her pulse fluttered wildly beneath her composure. As the evening drew to a close, the carriage awaited them once more. Eleanor seated herself with careful grace, unsure whether to confront the silence or welcome it. It was the Duke who finally spoke. "I should not have addressed Harrington with such directness. Yet I will not allow anyone to disturb your peace." "Your concern is generous," she murmured, "but unnecessary. I am recovering from the embarrassment." "Embarrassment fades," he replied, "but wounds inflicted upon one's worth leave deeper marks. I do not wish those marks to define you." His words lingered in the dim carriage like a vow he had not meant to utter aloud. Eleanor felt something shift within her, an awareness, fragile yet growing, that the Duke's involvement was not mere courtesy. But before she could ask the questions swirling through her thoughts, the carriage halted before her home. He stepped out, offered his hand, and helped her descend with a gentleness at odds with his reputation. "Good evening, Lady Eleanor," he said, his voice low. "Rest well." She thanked him, watching as he returned to his carriage, his figure framed by lantern light. Something in his manner suggested an unspoken conflict, a restraint that pulled him backward even as something deeper urged him forward. And Eleanor, standing beneath the softened glow of night, realized she wanted to understand what lay behind that conflict. She wanted to know why a man carved from composure had chosen to guard her heart. She touched the hidden locket beneath her collar, feeling its weight, and sensed that the truth, whatever it was, would soon demand to be known. The spring of 1814 unfurled over London with a deceptive gentleness, as though the season wished to cloak the sharper edges of society beneath drifting petals and polished charm. Yet within the gilded walls of Devonshire House, where chandeliers cast trembling rainbows upon parquet floors, gentleness had no place. The Duchess's ball, the crowning spectacle of the season, gathered the highest ranks of the ton into a single glittering mass, ladies adorned in whispering silks, gentlemen armed with clipped wit and calculated smiles, and orchestral strings sweet enough to mask the sting of whispered judgment. It was here, amid lavish splendor and ruthless elegance, that Lady Eleanor Harcourt's fate unraveled before the eyes of everyone who mattered. Eleanor, 22 and recently thrust into the season for the sake of her family's dwindling fortunes, stood beside her mother near the ballroom's center. Her pale blue gown, though modest compared to the shimmering displays around her, lent her an air of ethereal composure. She clutched her fan with an effort to appear calm, yet the tremor in her fingers revealed the unease she fought to conceal. She had never yearned for brilliance or attention. She desired only respectability, stability, and the quiet promise that Captain Jonathan Harrington, cavalry hero of the Peninsular War, had once seemed eager to offer. His attentions during the winter months had been steady enough to bring hope to her cautious heart and to her father's strained purse. When the orchestra shifted into a lively country dance, Eleanor searched for Harrington with a soft anticipation she could not entirely hide. He stood near the foot of the grand staircase, handsome in his decorated uniform, speaking animatedly to a circle of admirers. She waited for him to look her way. He did not. Instead, as if spurred by some theatrical impulse, he raised his voice and caught the room's attention with an announcement that ricocheted through the air like a musket shot. "My friends," he declared, "I am honored to share that I am newly engaged to Miss Charlotte Fairchild." A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. Fans fluttered. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Miss Fairchild, radiant and already flushed with triumph, dipped her head coyly while the room's gaze sharpened with predatory interest. Eleanor felt the world tilt. Her breath stalled as though stolen. Her fingers went slack around her fan, which clattered softly to the floor but went unnoticed beneath the roar of startled curiosity. Captain Harrington did not glance at her, not once, as he accepted congratulations. It was as if their winter courtship, their exchanged confidences, the promises delicately woven between dance sets, had never existed. In a single instant, Eleanor transformed from hopeful young lady to objective pity, and worse, derision. Already the whispers began. Poor creature, led on, desperate girl, her family must be frantic, each phrase slicing deeper than the last. Eleanor tried to steady herself, lifting her chin with instinctive dignity. Yet her vision blurred, and humiliation pressed upon her like a physical weight. She sensed, rather than saw, the drawing back of acquaintances. Even her mother's hand hesitated before touching her arm, fearing the association might tarnish her own fragile social standing. Eleanor's heart clenched with a pain she had not known one could endure and remain upright. At that moment, when the room had turned cold and cavernous, another presence stirred at the ballroom's edge. The Duke of Ashford, Nathaniel Pierce, 33, widowed, immaculately restrained, stood watching the scene with an unreadable expression. Tall, severe in bearing, and known for a reserve bordering on frost, he commanded attention even without seeking it. His grief-forged solitude after his wife's death had only deepened his legend, a man untouchable, unapproachable, yet possessing immense political influence within the regent's circle. No one expected him to move. No one believed he would involve himself in the humiliation of a young lady with whom he had never publicly associated. And yet, as Eleanor struggled to gather her scattered dignity, the Duke stepped forward. His stride was measured but intent, parting the crowd not through demand but through the quiet authority he carried like a mantle. Eleanor sensed movement before she saw its source. When she lifted her gaze, the Duke stood before her, bowing his head with a solemn precision that contradicted the chaos around them. "Lady Eleanor," he said, his voice calm and resonant enough to still the nearest whispers, "permit me the honor of escorting you." She blinked, uncertain she had heard correctly. The Duke of Ashford did not escort abandoned debutantes. He scarcely escorted anyone at all. "Your Grace," she managed, her voice fragile yet striving for composure, "I assure you I am quite well." "Society," he replied, offering his arm with unwavering steadiness, "must be reminded that your worth is not to be debated in overheated corners." His eyes held no pity, only an unexpected quiet fury on her behalf. "Allow me." His gesture, simple yet monumental, rippled through the ballroom like an unexpected storm. Conversations halted anew. The ton watched, stunned, as Eleanor placed her trembling hand upon his arm. The Duke guided her across the floor with the dignity of a man escorting a queen. It was an act of defiance against the cruelty she had just endured, one that startled her heart almost as much as Harrington's betrayal had shattered it. As they moved, Eleanor forced herself to breathe. The Duke did not speak, yet his presence lent her a strength she had not thought reclaimable. He paused only once when a barbed whisper, "Poor girl, clinging to the first noble she sees," cut through the murmurs. The Duke turned toward the offender with a single, icy glance that silenced not only the speaker but everyone within earshot. Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks, not from shame but from the startling sensation of being defended. When they reached the quieter edge of the ballroom, she withdrew her hand gently. "Your Grace," she whispered, "you need not entangle yourself in this." Her voice trembled, though she tried to steady it. "My humiliation need not become yours." His expression remained measured, yet something softened in the shadows of his gaze. "I do not involve myself in trifles, Lady Eleanor. And this, your dignity, is not a trifle." She caught her breath, startled by the depth beneath his calm. She wished to ask why he had chosen to intervene, what impulse had moved a man known for emotional distance to step into her ruin, but words failed her. Before she could summon them, he inclined his head in farewell, leaving her with a final, deliberate assurance. "You are not alone in this room," he said quietly. "Not while I stand." Then he stepped back into the throng, leaving her steadied yet shaken, wounded yet no longer abandoned. And as the crowd parted around him, Eleanor realized her story had not ended with humiliation, it had only begun.